She was the kind of woman whose name people forgot when they left a room, but never the warmth she left behind. Mira Santos moved through the Lachlan household the way sunlight slides across polished wood. Quiet, steady, necessary. For 10 years she had rocked a sleeping child back into calm, smoothed breakfast crumbs from a tiny chin, and whispered stories until an anxious boy or girl found sleep. She knew the house better than most of the family who owned it. She knew the squeak of a certain floorboard, which curtains caught the first morning, and how the late Mrs. Lachlan liked her tea, exactly 2 minutes steeped. And yet, on the morning the bracelet disappeared, everything she'd built with careful hands could be wiped away in a single breath. We open on a courthouse hallway. Myra's hands tremble as an officer loosens a cord on a paper wristband. Cameras flash like thunder. A woman in a bright suit, Victoria Lachlan, flawless smile, eyes like cut glass, points with the authority of money. Her words are patient and cold. She had access, she was there. The world, trained to believe velvet words drenched in wealth, leans in. Mira doesn't have a lawyer. She has an unpaid wage, an empty savings jar, and a face that won't stop echoing the lullabies she used to sing. Outside, the tabloids already print their verdict. Neighbors whisper. Former friends circle like vultures testing air. The mansion that once felt like family now feels like a courtroom itself, the kind with thin, paper-proof walls where a person can be judged before a single fact is spoken. Cut to a flash of home. Little Lily, hair in 2 careless pigtails, holding a crayon drawing that says, simply, "Mira is not bad." The child's innocence is a thin, fragile thread stretched between a woman who cares and a household that has chosen to believe a story tailored by influence and fear. Before the case can be framed by headlines and lawyers, before Mira can be reduced to a photograph and a verdict, something small and human still moves quietly in the middle of all that noise. The bond between a child and the woman who raised her. That bond will not stay silent forever. Before we continue Mira's story, take a breath with her. If you believe in stories where truth still matters, where kindness stands up to cruelty, subscribe, like, and tell us where you're watching from. Because sometimes the smallest voices tell the biggest truths. Now back to Mira. The story of the missing bracelet spread faster than the truth ever could. By noon, gossip sites were calling Mira the jealous nanny. By evening, talk shows had already decided her guilt. Inside the glass and marble mansion, Victoria Lachlan played the role of a wounded queen. She sat for interviews in soft lighting, her hand dramatically touching her heart as she said, "It's not about money. It's about betrayal." Every word was calculated, every tear rehearsed. She knew how to control a narrative, and she knew her husband, David, would not interrupt it. David Lachlan, a man who had inherited more wealth than he could ever spend, had also inherited a silence that looked like politeness. He watched the interviews play on television from his office, his fingers tightening around a glass of whiskey. He wanted to believe his wife, but something in her tone, that slight smirk behind the tears, didn't sit right. And yet he said nothing, because in his world, saying nothing was easier than doubting appearances. Meanwhile, Mira sat in her dim apartment, still wearing the uniform she couldn't afford to replace. The TV on her small counter flickered with Victoria's face, elegant, untouchable, saying her name again and again like a curse. The landlord stared from the hallway, whispering, "Did you really do it?" Mira didn't answer. She just closed the door and slid down against it, holding the small crayon drawing Lily had sent her. Outside, the press was feeding the storm. Headlines shouted, "Nanny steals late wife's jewel. Household betrayed by beloved caretaker." Inside, the scandal shaking the Lachlan fortune. Everyone wanted a villain, and Mira was perfect for the part. But inside the mansion, another story was unraveling quietly. Lily had stopped smiling. She refused her meals and kept asking one question. "When is Mira coming home?" Victoria's answers were sweet poison. "She's gone because she did something bad, sweetheart. Good people don't take things that aren't theirs." But Lily's eyes didn't believe her, because Lily had seen something that night, something no one had asked her about, something her father had forgotten to notice, something Victoria hoped would never be remembered. What if the only person who knows the truth is a child, and the woman everyone believes is innocent has the most to lose if she speaks? The mansion never slept. Even at midnight, the chandeliers glowed like stars captured and chained to ceilings. Yet that night, when the bracelet vanished, one light had burned longer than the rest, the one inside Victoria's study. The next morning, security reported that one camera had stopped recording at exactly 11:17 p.m., the same time the bracelet was last seen. When the guards filed the report, Victoria dismissed them with a smile and said, "Technology fails, doesn't it?" Her tone carried the kind of calm that only comes from certainty. Days later, when the insurance company arrived to assess the loss, Mira's name was already written on every form. Every checkbox that said suspect, every blank space that asked who had access. And beneath it all, Victoria's signature, clean, perfect, confident. But one thing didn't fit. The insurance policy on the bracelet had been updated just 1 week before the theft, tripled in value, signed again by Victoria Lachlan. Renee Carter, a 24-year-old law intern with too much idealism and too little sleep, noticed it while scrolling through a blog post about the case. She froze, frowning at the detail. "Why would someone insure a bracelet right before it disappeared?" she whispered. She opened her laptop, typing fast. Her fingers moved like a detective's pulse. Within minutes, she had accessed the court filing that named Mira Santos as the accused. No lawyer listed, no defense documents submitted. Renee closed her eyes and exhaled. "They're going to bury her," she said softly, "unless someone helps." Across town, Mira sat on her couch, holding the envelope that contained her court date. The paper trembled in her hands. The date circled in red felt like a countdown. She thought of Lily's laughter, the way she'd call Nanny, down the hall with her small arms wide open. That sound used to mean home. Now it meant loss. A knock broke the silence. When she opened the door, Renee stood there, hair windblown, laptop under her arm, determination in her eyes. "You don't know me," she said, "but I know you're innocent, and I think I can prove it." For the first time in weeks, Mira didn't cry from fear. She cried from relief. What if the woman who lost everything just found the one person willing to fight for her, but the enemy they're up against controls the truth itself? Morning light spilled across Mira's worn kitchen table as Renee spread out the files she'd gathered overnight. Insurance documents, property records, copies of Victoria's public statements. Every piece of paper smelled faintly of power and the lies it could hide. "Look here," Renee said, tapping the corner of a printout. "The bracelet was kept in the dressing room, not the safe. And the only key to that room wasn't yours, it was hers." Mira leaned forward, her tired eyes searching the words as if truth could be hidden in the ink. "But they'll never listen," she whispered. "People like her, people with money, they already wrote my story." Renee looked up. "Then we'll rewrite it." Across the city, inside the Lachlan mansion, Victoria prepared for a magazine interview. Her dress shimmered, her words dripped sugar. "I believe in forgiveness," she told the reporter, "but betrayal has consequences." Each line was practiced, each pause perfectly timed. Behind her smile, she glanced toward the hallway where Lily played quietly on the floor, drawing circles on paper. David entered mid-interview, adjusting his cufflinks, trying to act casual. But when the reporter left, his voice dropped. "Vic, this is too much," he said softly. "You've turned a mistake into theater." Victoria's eyes hardened. "A mistake she stole from us, David. You think I enjoy this?" He didn't answer. He just watched his wife's reflection in the mirror, flawless, untouchable, and realized he no longer recognized her. That evening, Lily crept into her father's office, clutching her latest drawing. It showed Mira standing beside her in the garden, both smiling under the sun. "Daddy," she said softly, "I remember Mommy's bracelet. It wasn't gone." "I saw it," David frowned. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" But before Lily could finish, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "That's enough stories for tonight," she said, her smile stretched tight. "Go to bed." Lily hesitated, then looked up at her father. "It was in her purse, Daddy." The words hung there like a spark in the dark. Victoria's smile froze. When a child speaks truth in whispers, only guilt hears it loud. What happens when the first thread of a lie begins to unravel? Inside the walls of power itself. The city courthouse was a world of marble and echoes. Renee walked through it with a laptop bag over her shoulder, determination in her eyes, and the kind of fear that comes only when you know you're stepping into someone else's war. Inside the clerk's office, she requested access to the official evidence list for the state versus Mira Santos. She expected disorganization. What she didn't expect was absence. Half the digital records were missing. The time-stamped folder for the night of the theft showed a blank gap, a whole hour erased. "Glitch," the clerk said with a shrug. Renee didn't buy it. "You don't just lose footage that matters," she muttered. "Someone made sure it was gone." Meanwhile, Mira was back at her apartment, folding her old uniform with careful hands. It wasn't a job anymore, it was memory. Every thread of the fabric reminded her of Lily's laughter echoing through marble halls, of the lullabies she'd sung in rooms that now felt haunted by silence. Her phone rang. "Mira," Renee said, breathless. The footage from that night's missing, and the backup drive, the one that would have stored a copy, was signed out under Victoria's initials. For a long moment, Mira didn't speak. Then she whispered, "She planned it." Renee paused. "It looks that way." Across town, in the Lachlan mansion, Victoria poured herself a glass of white wine. The house was quiet, except for the distant hum of cameras being installed at the front gate. She told herself she wasn't nervous, just cautious. But her fingers trembled when she read the latest article. "Young law intern challenges billionaire case," David noticed. "Why are you reading about her again?" he asked. Victoria smiled, setting the glass down carefully. "Because people love fairy tales," she said, "and I like to know when one's about to end." Later that night, Lily stood at her bedroom window holding her stuffed rabbit. She saw her father pacing in the garden, alone under the moonlight. She wanted to tell him again what she saw, that her stepmother wasn't telling the truth. But the last time she'd tried, Victoria had grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her cry. So Lily stayed quiet, for now. What happens when silence becomes the only witness left? The truth isn't gone, it's waiting for one small, brave voice to break the storm. Morning in the Lachlan mansion began like any other, sunlight gliding across polished marble, maids whispering through corridors, and the smell of coffee brewed in quiet luxury. But beneath that calm, something dark was rippling. Victoria sat in her dressing chair, scrolling through the news on her tablet. Her photo filled every headline. "Elegant heiress seeks justice after Nanny's betrayal." She smiled faintly. Attention was her armor and pity was her perfume. But downstairs, David was on the phone with his lawyer, his tone tight. "You said the insurance claim was processed already? That fast?" The voice on the other end confirmed. Victoria had filed it 2 days after the bracelet's disappearance. David hung up slowly. 2 days. That meant she hadn't even waited for the police report. He stood there for a moment, the sound of the world narrowing around him. Then he whispered, "What did you do, Victoria?" Across the city, in a cramped library corner, Renee connected the dots on her laptop. The insurance file showed a transfer to a private account, Victoria's. The bracelet had been valued at 3 times its worth, and the payout had cleared. Renee's chest tightened. This wasn't about theft, it was about removal. "Jealousy and greed," she murmured. "That's the real crime scene." She called Mira immediately. "Mira, I found the motive," Renee said. "She insured it for a fortune. You didn't just lose your job, you were meant to take the fall for her profit." There was a pause. Then Myra's soft voice, steady despite the pain. "She wanted me gone because Lily loved me more." Renee froze. That truth landed like thunder. It wasn't just about jewels, it was about possession. Victoria couldn't stand that the child she wanted to claim didn't love her, but loved the woman who wasn't born rich. That evening, David tried to speak to Lily again. He knelt beside her bed, brushing her hair gently. "Sweetheart, when you said you saw something that night, you can tell Daddy, okay?" Lily bit her lip, eyes glistening. "Mommy said if I tell, you'll send me away." David's blood ran cold. From the hallway, Victoria stood in the shadow, smiling faintly as if she'd just won again. Every lie leaves fingerprints, and Victoria's are starting to show. But what happens when the man who once looked away decides to open his eyes? For the first time in months, David Lachlan couldn't sleep. The mansion that once sounded like stability now echoed with things unsaid. Whispers behind doors, soft footsteps retreating when he entered a room, the faint hum of guilt crawling through marble halls. He walked into his late wife's old study, untouched since her passing. There among dust and silence stood a framed photo, his first wife holding baby Lily, and beside them, Mira smiling warmly in the background. David stared at it for a long time, the image cutting deeper than memory. He realized how much of Lily's childhood had Myra's fingerprints, not his own. Down the corridor, Victoria's laughter drifted from the master suite, light and practiced. David's jaw tightened. He opened the drawer where the household's old surveillance drive was supposed to be empty. He called the head of security. "When was this taken?" he asked. The man hesitated. "Ma'am ordered it destroyed, sir. Said it was malfunctioning." David's silence stretched until it became sharp. "Next time someone touches evidence," he said quietly, "you call me." Then he ended the call. Meanwhile, Renee sat in the courtroom's waiting area reviewing documents. She had no funding, no law firm, just persistence and caffeine. On the desk in front of her were 2 piles. The official story, Victoria's accusations, sworn testimonies, media spin. The real story, insurance fraud, erased footage, fear-driven silence. Mira sat beside her, hands folded. "They won't believe us," she said softly. Renee smiled faintly. "Then we'll make them listen." Her confidence was thin, but her conviction was steel. Across town, Victoria rehearsed her testimony in the mirror, every sentence polished like a weapon. Her voice dripped sympathy, her pauses timed for empathy. She knew how to play fragile, it had always been her strongest armor. But what she didn't know was that David was watching her reflection, not her words. He wasn't nodding this time. He was studying her. Something had changed in his silence. It wasn't obedience anymore. It was observation. The trial begins, and with every question asked, the masks begin to slip. But when truth finally steps into the courtroom, will anyone dare to believe it? The courthouse smelled of polish and tension. Reporters swarmed the marble steps, their cameras blinking like restless eyes. Headlines had already written the ending before the first word was spoken. Billionaire family faces their betrayer. But inside, beneath the heavy air and polished benches, the real story hadn't even started. Mira sat at the defendant's table in her faded uniform. It wasn't defiance that made her wear it, it was truth. She had nothing else left, no pretense to hide behind. The uniform said who she was, a woman who worked, cared, and was broken by those she served. Renee stood beside her, clutching her notes like armor. She was half the age of the opposing counsel, a young lawyer with no reputation to protect and everything to prove. Across from them sat Victoria, radiant in white silk, eyes soft for the cameras, her hand resting delicately on David's sleeve like a claim of ownership. The judge entered. Murmurs fell silent. "State your case," the prosecutor began. He spoke like a man auditioning for a performance. The accused, a domestic worker named Mira Santos, used her access and trust to commit theft against the very family who gave her a home. What she stole was not just a bracelet but the sanctity of trust. Each word echoed like a verdict already written. The jury nodded. Reporters scribbled. And Mira sat still not because she agreed, but because she refused to let them see her shake. Renee rose to speak, her voice clear but trembling slightly. "My client didn't steal anything. She raised a child in this family. She worked for them, lived for them, and now she's being punished for the crime of loyalty." Victoria's lips twitched, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned toward David and whispered, "She's performing for sympathy." David didn't reply. His gaze stayed on Mira, and for a brief second, something human flickered behind his guilt. The prosecutor continued with cold precision, calling staff who repeated the same rehearsed lines. "She was near the dressing room. She always looked at the bracelet. She needed money." Each statement landed like a stone on Myra's heart. By the end of the day, the courtroom felt smaller, her world tighter, but Renee's eyes burned with quiet resolve. "Tomorrow," she whispered to Mira, "we start fighting back." In a courtroom built for power, one voice refuses to stay small. But the truth doesn't arrive quietly. It enters through the one person no one expects. The second day of the trial dawned gray and cold. Rain streaked across the courthouse windows like blurred tears, and inside, the air carried the quiet weight of routine injustice. Mira sat in the same chair, hands folded on her lap, staring at nothing. Her eyes were dry now. She had run out of tears days ago. Every question that painted her as greedy, every lie told by someone she once served coffee to, had chipped another piece off her spirit. Across the room, Victoria was perfection itself. Her pearl earrings caught the light, her faint sighs rehearsed for sympathy. She played her part so flawlessly that even the jury seemed charmed by her tragedy. But not everyone in the room believed her. From the back row, Lily Loughlin, small and solemn, clutched her stuffed rabbit and watched in silence. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her nanny had been told to take her to school, but she had begged to come, insisting she needed to see what they were saying about Mira. When her father, David, noticed her, he didn't send her away. He couldn't. Something about the way Lily's eyes held pain made him realize what the court had taken from both of them. During recess, Victoria leaned over and whispered, "I don't want that child here, David. It's not good for her." David didn't answer. He just looked at his daughter, small, determined, staring straight ahead, and wondered what she already knew. That night back in the mansion, the air felt heavier than usual. Lily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the family portrait on the wall. She whispered to her rabbit, "They're lying about Mira, Mr. Buttons. Mommy said don't talk, but lying is worse, right?" From the doorway, Victoria watched, her expression cold. "Go to sleep," she said, but Lily didn't. When Victoria left, Lily opened her drawer and pulled out a small bracelet box, the one she'd found tucked under a pile of scarves in her stepmother's closet. Inside, the diamond bracelet shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I remember this, I saw her hide it." For the first time, the truth had weight, and it was in the hands of a child. The truth can't be silenced forever, not when innocence is brave enough to speak. What happens when Lily walks into court, holding the proof no one expected? The third day of trial began quietly, too quietly. The air inside the courtroom was sharp, the kind that steals your breath before you speak. Reporters adjusted their cameras. The prosecutor organized his notes with ritual confidence. And then the doors creaked open. A small pair of footsteps echoed down the aisle. Lily Loughlin entered, clutching her stuffed rabbit in one arm and a small velvet box in the other. Her hair was slightly tangled, her dress a little wrinkled, but her eyes were steady. The room went still. Victoria turned in her seat, her smile faltering for the first time. "David," she hissed under her breath, "why is she here?" He hadn't brought her. Lily had come on her own. The bailiff approached uncertain. "Miss, you can't." But the judge, curious, raised a hand. "Let her speak." Lily took a deep breath that seemed too big for her tiny chest. Then her small voice filled the room. "Everyone says Mira stole Mommy's bracelet, but she didn't. I saw where it really was." A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed. Victoria's face went pale. The judge leaned forward. "Go on, sweetheart, what did you see?" Lily opened the velvet box. The bracelet glittered inside, perfect, whole reel. Gasps filled the room. "I found it in Mommy Victoria's closet," Lily said softly. "She told me not to tell anyone or I'd get sent away." Victoria stood so fast her chair screeched across the floor. "That's enough, she's just a child, she doesn't know what she's saying." But the damage was done. David's hands clenched at his sides. He stared at the bracelet, then at his daughter, and finally at his wife. "Victoria," he said, his voice breaking. "Is this true?" She tried to smile, to weave one last lie, but her voice cracked under its own weight. I was protecting this family's image," she stammered. She was getting too close. "You both," her words disintegrated into silence. The judge nodded gravely to the bailiff. "The court will recess for investigation." Reporters surged forward. The flash of cameras became thunder. And in the middle of the chaos, Lily ran to Mira, wrapping her arms around her waist. "I told the truth, Mira," she whispered. "Now you can come home." Mira held her close, trembling, her tears falling into Lily's hair. For the first time in months, the truth was louder than the lies. The courtroom may have erupted in truth, but power doesn't fall quietly. What happens when the woman who built her world on lies finally faces the collapse she thought would never come? The courtroom emptied slowly after Lily's revelation, but the air still vibrated with shock. Outside, reporters shouted into microphones, their voices colliding in a chorus of disbelief. "The stolen bracelet found. Stepdaughter exposes billionaire's wife." The story that had destroyed Mira's name was suddenly devouring the woman who wrote it. Inside, Victoria Loughlin sat alone at the plaintiff's table, her manicured hands trembling against polished wood. Cameras weren't rolling now. No makeup, no soft lighting, just truth, raw and unfiltered. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently, "You need to leave, no statements, not now." But Victoria wasn't listening. She was staring at David, who stood frozen near the witness box, his face a storm of disbelief and heartbreak. "You let this happen," he said quietly. "You watched her lose everything and you said nothing." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of years. Victoria tried to find her poise again. "I did what I had to do. That woman was manipulating our child. She was loving her," David cut in sharply. "Something you never understood." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Victoria's eyes glistened, not from guilt but from rage. "Don't pretend you were any better, you believed me." He looked down. "Yes," he admitted, "and that's what I'll regret for the rest of my life." In a small corner of the courthouse, Renee and Mira sat together, waiting. The young lawyer's hands still shook with adrenaline. "We'll need the police report from the search," Renee said, trying to sound calm. "They'll find the closet. That'll be enough." Mira nodded, but her mind wasn't on the evidence. She was thinking about Lily's courage, the way her small voice had pierced through the lies of adults. "She shouldn't have had to do that," Mira whispered. "No," Renee said softly, "but sometimes the truth needs a child to carry it." That night, David returned home to a house that no longer felt like his. The chandelier still glowed, but the warmth was gone. He opened Victoria's office drawer, where the insurance documents lay waiting like ghosts. For the first time, he read every word. And when he reached the line that confirmed the early payout, the one signed in his wife's name, his heart sank. The truth was complete now. His silence had built her power, and his voice would be the one to end it. When guilt turns into courage, even the quiet can roar. But what happens when the man who once stayed silent decides to bring the proof to light, no matter the cost? Morning light broke over the city like judgment. News vans lined the Lachlan estate gates, their antennas raised like metal trees. Every headline carried the same name, Victoria Lachlan. But this time it wasn't about glamour or charity galas. It was about deception, fraud, and the nanny she tried to destroy. David stood in his office, the insurance file open across his desk. The paper trembled in his hands as he dialed the courthouse. "This is David Lachlan," he said to the clerk. "I need to submit new evidence in the Santos case." His voice didn't waver this time. He arrived before the cameras not to hide but to speak. "I believed a lie," he told the reporters waiting by the steps, "and in my silence I became part of it." Microphones thrust toward him like weapons, but David didn't flinch. "The bracelet wasn't stolen. It was hidden, and now you'll all know where." He placed the small safe box on the courthouse bench. Inside, neatly folded papers, bank transfers, and the diamond bracelet gleamed in the morning light. The flashes erupted like lightning. Inside the courtroom, Renee guided Mira through the swarm of journalists. "Stay calm," she whispered. "This isn't spectacle, it's justice." Mira didn't speak. Her eyes shimmered, but her steps were steady. For the first time, people parted for her instead of staring with suspicion. The judge reconvened the trial for review of new evidence. David stood on the witness stand, his voice rough but clear. "I found the bracelet in a safe my wife kept hidden, the same one she told police had been empty for years." The courtroom buzzed. Victoria, sitting alone now, looked smaller than ever. Her hands gripped the edge of her chair as her world collapsed. Renee rose to her feet, her tone calm, controlled, surgical. "Your Honor, what we see here is not just theft. It's manipulation, defamation, and abuse of power. My client didn't steal anything. She was stolen from her name, her dignity, her peace." The judge nodded gravely. "Proceed with full investigation," she said. Outside, the headlines changed. "Truth at last. Nanny vindicated. The Lachlan scandal shakes the city." And as Mira stepped into the light, Lily's small hand found hers. The truth has surfaced, but justice isn't finished. The woman who built her empire on lies is about to face the same system she once controlled. The world watched as Victoria Lachlan returned to the same courthouse she once ruled with her charm. But this time, there were no designer gowns, no soft lights, no cameras begging for her smile. Only cold marble, quiet murmurs, and the low rustle of reporters waiting for the sound of a fall. She sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped too tightly. Across the room sat Mira, calm, steady, wearing the same plain dress she had worn every day of the trial. There was no revenge in her eyes, only exhaustion, the kind of tired that comes after surviving a storm. The prosecutor listed the charges clearly: false accusation, perjury, obstruction of justice. Fraud, each word landed like a hammer against Victoria's perfect mask. The evidence was irrefutable: the insured bracelet, the erased footage, the fake statements signed under pressure. She tried to interrupt, but her lawyer pressed a hand to her arm. It was over. David sat in the front row, Lily beside him. When Victoria's eyes met his, there was no anger there anymore, just a quiet, terrible distance. He had loved her once, but that woman was gone, replaced by someone who had traded truth for control. The judge spoke with a calm authority that left no room for argument. "Mrs. Lachlan, your actions destroyed another person's livelihood, reputation, and peace. The court finds you guilty on all counts." The sentence fell like final rain. House arrest, restitution, public apology, and the forfeiture of her insurance settlement. For the first time, the silence in the room felt pure. Outside, the press swarmed, but the narrative had shifted. Victoria Lachlan convicted. Justice for Mira Santos. The same tabloids that once called Mira a thief now called her the nanny who spoke through silence. As they exited the courthouse, Renee turned to Mira. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief, but Mira shook her head. "No," she said softly, "we did it, and a little girl who refused to lie gave us the courage." Lily smiled up at her, gripping her hand. "Does that mean you're coming home now?" she asked. Mira knelt down, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Home isn't a place, Lily, it's the people who believe in you." And for the first time, she believed in herself. The verdict may be over, but healing takes longer than any trial. What happens when forgiveness, not punishment, becomes the truest form of victory? The courthouse doors closed behind them, but the echoes of the verdict lingered. The city outside buzzed with headlines and flashing lights, yet to Mira, everything sounded distant, like a storm finally moving away. She stood at the top of the steps, the afternoon sun washing her in gold. Reporters called her name, microphones reached for her face, but she didn't speak. Her silence said more than any statement ever could. Beside her, Renee guided Lily down the steps, careful of the flashes. David followed, slower, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. When he reached Myra, he hesitated. "Myra," he said quietly, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say this out loud." She turned to face him. There was no anger in her eyes, only weariness. "I was raised to believe silence was strength," David continued, his voice rough. "But I see now that silence is just another way of lying. I let my mother, my wife, my world, decide what was true. I let you stand alone when I should have stood beside you." Myra looked at him for a long moment, her hands folded over Lily's small shoulders. "You can't undo the hurt," she said gently, "but you can choose what you do next. Don't teach your daughter that silence wins." David nodded, tears catching at the edge of his voice. "I won't." Later that evening, the three of them stood quietly in the garden of the mansion, the place where everything had begun. Lily ran ahead, chasing butterflies near the old fountain. The laughter that had been missing for months finally returned to her voice. Renee joined Myra on the path. "They're already calling you an inspiration," she said. "You could sue, write a book, go public." Myra smiled faintly. "No, I don't want revenge or fame, I just want peace." Her voice softened. "Maybe I can help others find theirs too." Renee nodded, understanding immediately. "Then let's build something new." As the last light faded from the sky, Myra looked toward the mansion windows glowing in the dusk. For the first time, she didn't feel small standing beneath them. She had walked through humiliation, betrayal, and loss, and somehow she was still standing. Not because she won the fight, but because she never stopped believing that truth, no matter how late, always finds a way home. Out of the ashes of injustice, something powerful begins, not vengeance, but purpose. What if the woman they broke becomes the one who rebuilds hope for others like her? Create in 16:9 ratio image, keep consistent images as per above instructions. Give image prompt for EV scene. 6 months later, the city skyline glittered beyond the tall windows of a new building downtown. A modest brass sign by the entrance read, "The Clara Foundation for Women Seeking Justice." Myra stood in the hallway, surrounded by laughter, paperwork, and the quiet hum of purpose. What had started as one woman's tragedy had turned into a sanctuary for dozens of others, women silenced, blamed, and forgotten. The first time she'd walked into this office, it had been empty. Now it was alive. A group of volunteers organized case files, another brewed tea for a client trembling with fear. It was the same kind of fear Myra once knew too well. "Ready for the press meeting?" Renee asked, stepping into the room with her ever-present clipboard and tired smile. Myra nodded. "As ready as anyone can be to talk about the worst chapter of her life." Renee grinned softly. That worst chapter became someone else's first chance. They shared a look of mutual pride, the kind built through sleepless nights and impossible hope. At the podium, the cameras clicked again, but this time Myra didn't hide. "I was once called a thief," she began, her voice steady. "I was humiliated for a crime I didn't commit, and for months I thought justice was only for the powerful. But I was wrong. Justice belongs to anyone brave enough to demand it." Her words weren't polished, they were real. Raw, human. The room fell silent, even the cameras seemed to pause to listen. "This foundation isn't about revenge," she continued. "It's about rebuilding lives when the world refuses to believe you. It's about giving a voice to those who were told to stay quiet." As she spoke, David stood at the back, unnoticed by most. He wasn't there for the cameras. He was there to watch the woman he had once failed and now admired. Lily sat on his shoulders, clapping proudly. "That's my Myra," she whispered, her voice carrying through the room. Myra caught her eye and smiled. "And this," she said, pointing toward the little girl, "is the reason truth always wins in the end, because it's taught, not bought." When the lights dimmed, Renee turned to her with quiet awe. "You know," she said, "you've changed more than your own life." Myra looked out the window at the city lights. "No," she said softly, "I just reminded it to listen again." But the world never stops testing the strong. When an unexpected visitor from Myra's past walks in with a new case, one that mirrors her own, will she have the courage to face old wounds again? Rain drummed softly against the glass walls of the Clara Foundation. The afternoon light had dimmed, and the office buzzed with quiet energy, phones ringing, papers rustling, stories being rewritten into hope. Myra sat at her desk reviewing case reports when the front door opened. A woman stepped inside, mid-30s, worn from worry, her clothes simple but neat. Her hands trembled as she held a folded envelope. "Can I help you?" Myra asked gently, rising to greet her. The woman nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I was told you help people who have been accused unfairly." Myra offered a warm smile. That's what we do. Please sit. The woman introduced herself as Alina Ruiz. She'd been working as a live-in caretaker for a wealthy family on the city's north side. And just like Myra once was, she had been accused of theft, a missing diamond ring this time. The employer's mother, a socialite with a ruthless streak, had insisted Alina was guilty. The story was already in the news. As Alina spoke, Myra felt the air tighten. Every word, every fear, every humiliation, it was like reliving her own nightmare. They told me not to fight, Alina said, tears streaking her face. That no one would believe a maid over them, but I can't stay silent. I didn't do it. Myra sat back, the memories rising like ghosts. For a moment, she saw herself again, sitting in a police station, hands cold, world collapsing. Renee appeared in the doorway, scanning the scene quickly. Should I pull the legal file? She asked. Myra hesitated, then nodded. Yes, this one we take personally. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Myra stood alone by the window. The city lights shimmered below, distant and indifferent. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered to her reflection. Another story, another fight, but this time no one stands alone. Behind her, a small voice spoke. You'll help her, won't you? Lily stood there, wrapped in a blanket, eyes half asleep. Myra smiled softly, kneeling beside her. That's why we're here, sweetheart. Lily yawned, leaning into her arms. Mommy says when you help people, you make the world quieter. Myra looked toward the glowing skyline and murmured, then let's make it silent with peace. The cycle repeats, another woman, another lie. But this time, Myra is no longer the victim. She's the force the powerful never saw coming. By morning, the Clara Foundation was alive with urgency. Case files scattered across the table, coffee cups half full, and tension thick as truth itself. Myra and Renee stood over a board pinned with photos, receipts, and articles about Alina Ruiz's case. This isn't just about a missing ring, Renee said, circling the name the Carrington family in red ink. They're connected to half the same law firms that defended Victoria Loughlin. Myra froze. The name Carrington pulled at something deep inside her. She remembered the smug lawyers, the fabricated witness statements, the polished lies. It wasn't coincidence, it was a pattern. They recycle victims, she whispered. Different faces. Same machine. Alina sat quietly at the end of the table, wringing her hands. They have cameras, money, lawyers. I don't even know what to do in court, she said softly. Myra sat beside her, placing a reassuring hand over hers. You do exactly what I did, she said. You tell the truth, and we make them listen this time. Over the next week, Renee dug into the Carringtons' records. What she found made her blood run cold. Hidden insurance claims, forged invoices, and hush payments to staff who had confessed to theft, always followed by quiet settlements. These aren't isolated incidents, Renee said, laying the evidence before Myra. They've been staging thefts for years, scamming insurers and ruining lives to protect their reputation. Myra exhaled slowly, anger simmering beneath calm. Then we expose the pattern, we take them down publicly. Renee hesitated. That could make you enemies in every high society circle. You know that, right? Myra smiled faintly. Then I'll finally be in the right company. That night, Myra returned home late. Lily was asleep on the couch with the TV still playing. On the screen, an old interview of Myra from weeks ago. The anchor had called her the woman who brought truth to power. She muted the sound and watched herself, remembering how terrified she'd been that day. But now she felt something different, strength. The camera in that clip had captured a survivor. But the woman staring back at the screen tonight wasn't just that anymore. She was a fighter. She whispered to herself, they used to call me guilty. Now they'll call me justice. Rehook for part 18. Power always fights back. And when the Carringtons strike to silence the Foundation, Myra faces her most dangerous test yet, protecting the truth before it disappears again. Part 18, When Power Strikes Back, Cinematic Realism. 470 words, the warning came before dawn. A soft knock on the door of the Clara Foundation startled the night guard awake. When he opened it, no one was there, just an envelope taped to the glass. Inside, a single sheet of paper with words typed neatly across it. Stop digging. Some stories are better left buried. By sunrise, Myra stood in her office reading it, the morning light casting long shadows across the floor. Renee entered, coffee in hand, eyes narrowing as she saw the note. They're scared, Renee said. That means we're close. But fear had a way of spreading. Within days, the Foundation's emails were hacked, client data corrupted. News channels that had praised Myra weeks ago now aired anonymous rumors questioning her motives, calling her an opportunist seeking fame. It was happening again, the same machine, the same playbook. Alina's trial was only a week away, but the attacks were relentless. Sponsors withdrew support. Online trolls flooded the Foundation's page with hate. And one evening, as Mira left the building, a black car followed her for 3 blocks before disappearing into the dark. Still, she refused to back down. "Let them come," she told Renee in a late-night meeting, voice calm but fierce. "They think I'm still the woman who cried in that courtroom. They don't understand that woman doesn't exist anymore." Renee rubbed her temples. "We just need one solid piece of proof, something they can't erase or discredit. Without it, they'll twist this case the same way they did yours." Mira stared at the evidence board, her eyes tracing red lines between the Carrington family and half a dozen past theft cases. "There's something missing," she said. "A pattern like this always leaves a trail, something personal, something they overlooked." That night, she called David. His voice was tired but warm. "I've been following the case," he said. "I can make a few calls. People still owe me favors, even the ones who won't admit it." Mira hesitated. "You don't have to get involved again." "I do," he replied, "because last time I stayed silent. Not this time." The next morning, David arrived at the Foundation carrying a folder marked private insurance correspondence. Inside were confidential records, claims filed by the Carrington matriarch with the same adjuster who once worked for Victoria Loughlin. Proof. Renee's eyes widened. "This connects everything." Mira smiled faintly. "Then they've just written their own confession." They thought fear would silence her. Instead, it armed her. With evidence in hand, Mira prepares to face the most powerful family in the city, knowing one wrong move could destroy everything she's built. The city's Supreme Court was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled the aisles, microphones lined the railing, and the Carrington family sat stiffly in their polished seats, calm on the outside, coiled like serpents within. At the defense table, Mira adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. She wasn't in a maid's uniform anymore. She stood as an advocate not just for Alina, but for every woman who'd ever been silenced by wealth. Beside her, Renee flipped through her notes, jaw set like stone. Across the room, Madeline Carrington, the family matriarch, wore pearls that gleamed under the courtroom lights, the same elegance that once shielded her from suspicion. She smiled faintly at Mira, a warning disguised as grace. "You think you've uncovered a scandal," she whispered as they passed each other before session began. "But what you've done is wake the kind of power that doesn't forgive." Mira stopped, meeting her eyes without blinking. "Then maybe it's time power learned what forgiveness feels like." The judge entered. Cameras clicked. Renee opened the case with calm precision. "This is not an isolated theft. It's a pattern of systemic manipulation, insurance fraud, coercion, and defamation, hidden behind money and reputation." She presented evidence. Identical insurance claims, falsified employee testimonies, digital traces of hush payments. Each slide projected onto the courtroom screen felt like a nail in the coffin of privilege. Then came the moment that silenced everyone. Renee held up the document David had recovered, a private correspondence between Madeline Carrington and the same insurance agent who once processed Victoria Loughlin's fraudulent claim. "It states," Renee read aloud, "that another staff-related loss will ensure continued partnership bonuses, dated 3 months before the alleged theft." Gasps rippled through the room. Madeline's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. "Proceed," she ordered. Mira turned to Alina. "You ready?" she whispered. Alina nodded shakily and took the stand. Her voice trembled at first, but as she told her story of the night she was accused, the humiliation, the fear, something changed. Her voice grew stronger. "They told me the world would believe them over me," she said through tears. "But today I'm not standing alone." Mira smiled faintly. "No, you're not." Outside, the headlines were already shifting. Another elite family exposed. The nanny who changed everything again. Inside, Madeline's poise began to crack. Her hand shook as she reached for her glass of water. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to control. Power can hide the truth for a while, but not forever. As the verdict approaches, Mira's fight isn't just for justice anymore. It's for redemption, legacy, and every silenced voice that came before her. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the rustle of a single paper. Every eye turned toward the bench as the judge adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. Mira clasped her hands together, her pulse steady but fierce. Renee stood beside her, shoulders squared, gaze fixed ahead. Alina sat trembling, a single tear tracing her cheek. Across the aisle, Madeline Carrington stared straight ahead, chin lifted, as if defiance could still rewrite the story. But her eyes betrayed her, sharp, frantic, flickering toward the exit as if she could still find a way out. The judge cleared her throat. After reviewing the evidence presented, the false claims, manipulated testimony, and coordinated defamation, this court finds the defendants, Madeline Carrington and associates, guilty of fraud, perjury, and criminal coercion. A stunned hush fell. Then the judge continued. The victims named in these reports, including Miss Elena Ruiz, are hereby exonerated of all charges. The gavel struck once. And just like that, the dynasty that once crushed lives for profit collapsed under its own weight. Elena covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Renee exhaled, closing her eyes in relief. And Myra, for a long moment, she didn't move. Her fingers trembled slightly before she whispered, "It's done." Madeline's lawyer whispered frantically as officers approached, but she didn't resist. As she stood, she turned to Myra one last time. "You think you've changed the world?" she spat. Myra met her gaze calmly. "No," she said softly. "I just stopped letting it change me." The room erupted into applause, not the chaotic kind, but the quiet, heartfelt rhythm of people who had waited too long for justice. Reporters pushed forward, microphones flashing, but Myra only smiled faintly and shook her head. "This isn't my victory," she said. "It belongs to every woman who was told her truth didn't matter." Outside the courthouse, the steps were bathed in golden sunlight. Elena hugged her tightly, whispering, "You saved my life." Myra smiled. "No, Elena, you saved your own. I just reminded you that you could." Renee joined them, holding her phone. "We're trending again," she said with a wry grin. Myra laughed softly. "Let them talk. This time it's the right story." As they descended the courthouse steps, Lily waited at the bottom, waving her arms wildly. "Myra, you did it!" she shouted, her little voice echoing off the marble. Myra knelt and opened her arms. "We did, sweetheart." Lily hugged her tightly, whispering, "Does this mean the world is good again?" Myra kissed her forehead. "It means it's trying, my love. And that's enough. Justice has been served, but peace is harder to win." As Myra rebuilds her life, a letter from an unexpected source reminds her the battle against silence never truly ends. A week had passed since the verdict, but the echoes of it still lived everywhere, in headlines, in whispers, and in the way people now looked at Mira Santos. At the Clara Foundation, bouquets arrived daily. Letters of gratitude poured in from strangers across the world, women who had been silenced, families who had been shamed, people who now believed that truth could still win. Myra kept them all stacked neatly in a wooden box on her desk, the same way she once folded her pain, carefully, privately, but never forgotten. That morning, as sunlight streamed through the blinds, Renee entered holding an envelope that didn't look like the others. It was plain ivory paper sealed with an embossed crest, the Lachlan estate. Myra froze, her heart beat once hard. She hadn't heard from David in months. "Should I open it?" Renee asked. Myra nodded slowly. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "Myra, I watched the trial from home. You've done what few ever could, turned pain into purpose. I've closed my mother's old estate and turned its proceeds into something she never believed in, truth. Half of the funds now belong to your foundation. It's the least I can do for what you gave us, redemption. Ethan and I talk about you often. He remembers everything. He says you taught him the meaning of courage. I finally understand what he meant. Thank you not for forgiving us, but for showing us how to start again." David. Myra read the letter twice, her vision blurring. She placed it gently on the desk, her hand resting over it for a long, silent moment. Renee watched her quietly. "You okay?" Myra smiled faintly through tears. "Yes, because this isn't about guilt or money. It's about what's possible when someone finally learns to listen." That evening, as the city lights flickered awake, Myra stepped onto the foundation's balcony. Lily was there, coloring on the floor, her small feet swinging. "Is that from Mr. David?" Lily asked innocently. Myra nodded. "He's helping us help others now." Lily smiled, eyes bright. "Then that means it's working, right? The world's learning." Myra knelt, brushing a curl from her face. "Yes," she whispered, "one story at a time." She looked out at the skyline, vast, flawed, and still beautiful, and felt something rare, peace without silence. Peace never means the end, only a pause. When Myra's story inspires others to rise, the movement she began grows far beyond her control, and a new fight for truth begins. Months passed, seasons changed, but the world hadn't stopped saying her name. What began as a courtroom redemption had turned into a movement. Across cities, billboards glowed with a new slogan born from Myra's words. "Truth belongs to everyone." The phrase had become the anthem of 1,000 women, whispered in newsrooms, classrooms, and court corridors. The Clara Foundation had grown, no longer a modest office in downtown streets, but a national network. Volunteers worked through nights, lawyers offered pro bono aid, and survivors gathered under one promise: no voice would ever stand alone again. Mira stood in the middle of the new headquarters, walls covered with photos of women she'd helped, real faces, real victories. Each one carried a story that once began in fear and ended in courage. Renee entered holding a laptop. "You need to see this," she said. On screen played a live stream, a protest outside a courthouse in another country. Dozens of women held placards reading number "The Mira Effect." A young reporter shouted into her microphone, "These women say they were inspired by the former housemaid who fought a billionaire and won." The crowd chanted her name, their voices fierce and unbroken. Mira's breath caught. "They're not chanting for me," she whispered. "They're chanting for themselves." Renee smiled softly. "That's what you built, a voice that multiplies." Later that evening, Mira sat alone in her office. The noise of the day faded into city hums and distant traffic. She thought of the past, of the girl who once sat in a courtroom trembling, terrified to speak. And then she thought of the world now echoing with stories that would never have existed if she hadn't. The intercom buzzed. "Mira, someone here to see you." "Who is it?" "A reporter says she's doing a feature on the Foundation's global impact. Her name's Sarah Hamilton." Mira froze. The name struck like a quiet echo. Hamilton, the family name she hadn't heard in years. When the young woman entered, Mira was startled. Same blue-gray eyes, same grace, yet younger, softer, humbled. "My grandmother was Margaret Hamilton," Sarah said gently. "Your story changed how I see her and myself. I wanted to thank you." Mira studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Then maybe the world is learning." They stood together at the window, the city alive beneath them, not perfect, not silent, but awake. Truth had started as one woman's whisper. Now it roared across generations. The movement has gone global, but every wave creates resistance. When the system fights back harder than ever, Mira must protect what she built, even if it means risking everything again. It started as whispers again, the kind that move like smoke before a fire. A donor pulled out, then another. Then the Foundation's bank account was flagged for irregularities. Within days, media outlets that once praised Mira began releasing anonymous reports questioning her funding sources. Headlines flipped overnight. "Hero or hustler, the truth behind the Clara Foundation." "Is Mira Santos exploiting the justice she preaches?" Renee stormed into the office, tablet in hand. "They're trying to destroy us," she said, eyes blazing. "These sources are fake. Look at the timestamps. They're coordinated." Mira skimmed the article calmly, though her stomach turned. "It's the old machine again," she said. "Different faces, same fear." Renee frowned. "They can't stand that you gave power to people who aren't supposed to have it." Mira nodded slowly. "And that means we're right where we need to be." That night, she returned home to find Lily waiting on the couch, clutching her school tablet. "They're saying bad things about you again," Lily said softly. "My friends showed me." Mira sat beside her, brushing her hair gently. "Do you believe them?" Lily shook her head. "I believe you." Mira smiled faintly, but her eyes shimmered. "Then that's all that matters, my love." She looked out the window at the city lights, the same city that once condemned her, then celebrated her, and now turned its claws again. It reminded her of a truth she had learned the hard way. Justice isn't a destination. It's a war that starts over every morning. By morning, Renee called with updates. "The financial freeze came from a private petition filed by Carrington and Hale Law Group," she said grimly. "They're trying to shut us down using your own success as leverage." Mira laughed quietly, disbelief laced with exhaustion. "Of course it's them. When they lose the courtroom, they buy the system." Renee leaned forward, voice low. "We can fight this, but it'll mean going public again. Interviews, exposure, pressure. They'll dig through every part of your past." For a long moment, Mira said nothing. She stared at the Foundation's logo on the wall. "Truth belongs to everyone," then she straightened. "Then let them dig. If my story can be broken, it means I didn't tell it completely. Let's finish it, this time on my terms." Renee smiled, pride cutting through the fear. "You really never learn to stop, do you?" Mira looked out the window, the morning sun glinting in her eyes. "I stopped once," she said quietly, "and the world almost forgot the truth. Never again." When they try to bury her, she digs up their lies instead. The battle isn't just about truth anymore, it's about survival. What happens when Mira puts everything on the line to defend the legacy she built from ashes? The storm Mira feared finally arrived, not with thunder but with headlines. Every network, every channel, every blog carried the same question. Was the Clara Foundation built on lies? Photos of Myra filled the screen, the same ones used years ago when she'd been called a thief. It was happening again, the wheel turning full circle. Only this time she wasn't the maid in a courtroom. She was the woman the world looked to for truth. Renee burst into her office, face pale. They've frozen all accounts. Staff payrolls, legal operations, everything's locked. And someone leaked internal emails. They're twisting our words. Myra stood by the window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. So that's their play, she said quietly. Destroy faith, not facts. Renee slammed the file onto the desk. We can fight this, we can call the press. Myra shook her head. No, not the press, the people. They started this story and they'll decide how it ends. That night she went live. No cameras, no studio lighting, just her, sitting in the dim glow of her office with truth as her only script. Her voice was calm, steady, and heartbreakingly human. They've called me a liar again. Maybe it's easier to believe that one woman can't make a difference, because if she can, then everyone else has to try too. But I didn't build the Clara Foundation for myself. I built it for every person who was told to stay quiet, and if they burn me for that, then so be it. The feed spread like wildfire. Within hours, millions tuned in. Survivors, volunteers, former clients, all of them began posting their stories under the tag #MClara. The movement she'd built no longer needed her voice to speak. It had its own. Days later, the government's inquiry backfired. Every attempt to discredit Myra uncovered more corruption, politicians linked to the Carringtons, judges who'd been bribed to suppress cases. In trying to bury her, they'd unearthed themselves. Renee stormed into Myra's office with tears in her eyes. They're done, every one of them. The freeze has been lifted and the inquiry cleared your name completely. Myra looked up slowly. So, we won? Renee smiled through her tears. No, you changed the rules. That evening, Myra stood before a sea of people gathered outside the foundation, faces lit by phone screens, candles, and hope. Don't thank me, she said into the microphone, her voice echoing into the night. Thank every person who refused to stay silent. You kept truth alive. The crowd erupted. And for the first time, Myra let herself cry not from pain, but from peace. She looked up at the night sky, whispering, "It's over and it's beginning again." The war for truth is never truly over. It only changes hands. As Myra finally steps away, she passes the torch to a new generation, proving that legacies aren't built in power, they're built in courage. It was dawn. Soft light spilled across the city skyline as Myra stood on the rooftop of the Clara Foundation. The building that had once been nothing more than a dream scribbled on paper. Below her, hundreds of volunteers were already gathering, setting up for the Foundation's annual Day of Voices, an event celebrating every life the movement had touched. Renee stood beside her, arms folded, smiling quietly. You built all this, she said softly, from a courtroom floor to the world stage. Myra shook her head. No, Renee, we built it, every woman who stood when she was told to kneel. Every truth that refused to stay buried. She turned her gaze upward. The sun climbed higher, painting the glass towers gold. It felt like closure and a beginning. A young intern approached, holding a letter. This just came for you, Miss Santos. Myra took it, the handwriting instantly familiar, careful, elegant, almost trembling. It was signed Sarah Hamilton. Dear Myra, I don't know if I'll ever deserve forgiveness for what my family did, but I want to thank you. Your foundation helped one of my classmates escape an abusive employer last month. I see the world differently because of you. My grandmother's name will be remembered for her cruelty, but yours for your courage. You didn't just win justice, you made it contagious. Myra folded the letter gently, her eyes misting. Even the shadows learned to listen, she whispered. Hours later, the auditorium filled. Cameras rolled, lights glimmered, and a new banner draped across the stage. Truth belongs to everyone, 10 years of Clara. Myra stepped onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, but she lifted her hand for quiet. This isn't a celebration of me, she began. It's a reminder that injustice doesn't end with a verdict. It ends when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. I was once a maid who had nothing but honesty to her name, and the world told me it wasn't enough. But here's what I learned. Honesty may not protect you at first, but it always wins in the end. Maybe not quickly, maybe not quietly, but always. Tears shimmered across faces in the audience. Cameras zoomed in, recording every word that would echo across continents. And now, she continued smiling, it's time for new voices to lead. Renee stepped forward, stunned. Myra, you don't mean? Myra nodded. You've been ready for years. The world needs your fire now. The crowd erupted again as Renee hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'll make you proud." "You already have," Myra replied. Later, as the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Myra walked out quietly through the side exit. The air was cool. Streetlights flickered like old memories. Down the block, a little girl was playing with chalk on the pavement, drawing hearts and tiny letters. When she looked up, Myra recognized the familiar sparkle of hope. "What are you writing?" Myra asked. The girl grinned shyly. "A word my mom taught me, truth." Myra knelt beside her, smiling through tears. "Never forget it," she said softly. "It's stronger than anything." The girl nodded and kept drawing, filling the sidewalk with color. Myra watched her for a moment, then turned away, her steps light, her heart finally unburdened. The world had once taken her voice. Now it spoke in thousands. As the final light of the day faded, Myra whispered to herself, not as the accused, not as the victim, not even as the hero, but simply as a woman who proved that even the smallest truth can outlive every lie.